why aren't way more NEMT businesses doing stretcher work?
One of the big things that a lot of the brokers have reached out to me to let me know that they don't have enough stretcher operators in certain areas.
Welcome back to NEMT Experts. I've got with me the one and only, the big dog, Mr. Howard Berkowitz. Howard, how you doing?
Good. Doing fine. How are you?
Never been better. Good to have you back, Howard.
Thank you. Great to be back.
You do a ton of stretcher and wheelchair trainings, especially recently for NEMT companies all over the country. That's what we're going to deep dive into. Howard, can you just talk about what it is you've been doing in these stretcher trainings and wheelchair trainings, and how they go, what the purpose is, the whole shebang?
Sure. One of the big issues today is individuals not being trained correctly. And that's sort of where NEMTAC steps in and writes those standards. We are developing specific training for individuals to really protect the industry, to help the industry, and to set standards within the industry. And that training is kind of a part of it, where people need to understand what to do and how to do it. And when they fail to train, disaster happens. And that's case in point in a lot of different things that when people are training and when they're looking at different things, it's important to make sure they're trained properly. So what I've been doing as the master trainer of NEMTAC certified instructor going around the United States, doing quite a bit of training. The wheelchair training first, there's problems with that where individuals do not secure individuals properly and people get injured, and in some cases some people died. So we're trying to help the industry protect the individual passengers that are being transported, protect the companies from not having lawsuits, protect the companies from not having their rates jacked up and canceled because of failure in the process of doing a wheelchair securement or a stretcher securement or wheelchair transport or stretcher transport. So all of these items are important to make sure individuals grow and understand what the liability is and how it affects their bottom line and how it affects their company, and they could lose their company. So it's important to make sure individuals are trained properly and make sure they're on the right track.
Not to be understated. So Howard, you're not only protecting NEMT businesses that already do stretcher transports from, having claims brought against them or issues, but you're also helping NEMT businesses who do not currently do stretcher work to get into doing that kind of work. Is that right?
That's correct. We're teaching them that they can create another revenue source by providing stretcher. As long as the governmental jurisdiction where they're based allows it, they can do non-emergency medical transportation stretcher work as well. Yeah.
And, stretcher is often a lot more lucrative than your ambulatory and even wheelchair transports. So I think that, more and more NEMT businesses are realizing, hey, they can do hospital discharges by doing stretcher NEMT and other kinds of stretcher rides. And, as more companies realize that, these stretcher trainings are the thing to help launch them into that. Can you tell us about how someone goes about getting a stretcher training from you and what is involved in the actual training?
Well, part of the overall system is that they can contact me directly. They can contact NEMTAC directly, either one. And when they do that, they just say, hey, we're looking to get wheelchair instructors with, for our own company to be trained, or stretcher instructors so they can train people and make sure that everything is done correctly. We want to be NEMTAC certified, and that's important. What's also important is all the shareholders, which means in layman's terms, all of the brokers out there, all of the healthcare companies. This year at the NEMTAC 2025 conference in Dallas, Texas, what you're going to see is something a little bit different than the previous years. The previous years were always good, but this year The difference will be shareholders will be in the location and making everything seamless, meaning that you're going to have transportation brokers in there. You're going to have healthcare companies in there. You're going to have governmental agency people in there. You're going to have regulators in there. Everybody is part of this process. And by making them part of the process, we can solve a lot of these problems and correct a lot of these issues that were occurring all along.
And what would you say are some of the major issues that need to be solved in getting more NEMT businesses able to do stretcher transports?
One of the big things that a lot of the brokers have reached out to me to let me know that they don't have enough stretcher operators in certain areas, and they're struggling. They get contracts and they're handling contracts, but they don't have the transportation providers to provide that service. I mean, they literally have to go out of the area if they need a stretcher in any kind of local jurisdiction. They need to go out of that area, and basically that increases the cost for them, which we understand. Everybody's trying to control costs, but the bottom line is that we need to have more stretcher operators out there to provide that service of individuals who can't sit up, and they have to be in a prone position, which is what the actual stretcher requirement is.
So these brokers, they're finding NEMT businesses that are a long distance away just to be able to do stretcher transports. Are they also contracting ambulance companies to do stretcher transports?
Sometimes, if they're really, really stuck, they will do ambulance. But the problem is ambulance companies will charge them quite a bit more for non-emergency transports, and they can't afford the cost, even though brokers are making a good amount of the dollars in the transport because they have the infrastructure behind them. The non-emergency companies need to make it also, but they can't afford to provide service from an ambulance company because the cost is just too high. Plus, you don't want to take ambulance companies out of the loop because that would reduce the amount of ambulances in an overall network, which would reduce the amount of 911 responses that are out there. That's one of the reasons that non-emergency was actually developed.
Howard, tell me this. Like, a lot of NEMT businesses, they think, okay, starting out with ambulatory is easy, then wheelchair is a little harder to get into and do, and stretcher is the hardest level of transport to get into and start doing, right? What really is the difficulty in moving from, let's say you're doing wheelchair work into doing stretcher work, right? Like, what are the biggest obstacles people think there are into getting stretcher work, and easiest ways to overcome those obstacles?
Well, some of the training is similar but different. And when I say similar but different, there is a risk to both of those things much more than ambulatory. So the training has to be on point, where individuals need to understand that the need to protect, not only the person, most and foremost, the person who they're transporting, the passenger, needs to be protected. And by doing the training and understanding what the training does, how it does it, that would make everything a lot better and a lot safer. Stretcher, same thing. There are a number of items for stretcher that are completely different. It's a completely different mobility type, and therefore there are different risks inherent with each one of those items. So the overall process has to be looked at, and you have to make sure that the drivers understand what they're doing. They have to communicate with the passenger that they're taking to make sure they're comfortable, because again, that's why we're there. And there's a lot of accidents and things like that if they fail to do that. A lot of individuals literally watch a video online and they go to do the work, and that's when stuff goes catastrophic and terribly wrong. There are a lot of accidents and issues that occur because of that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's not to be understated, the importance of these trainings. So do me this, Howard. Like, can you give me the playbook? Let's say I am the owner of an NEMT business. I operate with something like 7 to 10 vehicles, and I largely do ambulatory and wheelchair work. And then, I learn about the opportunity in stretcher, but I don't know how to start doing it. And there's a number of steps involved, right? I have to get vehicles that are outfitted for stretcher work. I have to get stretcher equipment. I have to get my drivers trained. Do I use existing drivers that are doing wheelchair, level them up? I'll have to get attendants, 2 crew members to do a stretcher trip. Like, give me the full playbook of steps if I'm a wheelchair company operator, right? And I want to get into stretcher. Like, what are the 5 things or whatever it is that I have to do at a high level?
Okay, so first thing, before you even decide to do that and invest a boatload of money, is make sure your state authorizes and is okay with individuals doing it. You don't want to put a boatload of money in, like, for example, in Texas, companies are not permitted to do non-emergency medical transportation stretcher work. That's what the law they have. There are some things behind the scenes because of that, but you can't do that. So you wouldn't want to invest a boatload of money, get a stretcher vehicle set up, get all the stretcher, buy all of that stuff, and find out you can't do it. So what I always say is do your homework first. Investigate if you can do it. Check with your governmental agencies and your licensing divisions, departments, consumer affairs, whoever it is. Make sure you're able to do that. Once you're able to do that, don't just go out and buy all the equipment. Do your homework. Do a overall look at the industry. Join NEMTAC. Get an idea. Make some phone calls. Go sit by a hospital. Go sit by any emergency area. Sit there for a couple hours. Do your homework. See what companies come in and out. So you're kind of doing your due diligence to seeing, oh, wait a minute, ABC company came in. What are they? Oh, they're non-emergency. Oh, okay. So I'm seeing ABC company at 123 hospital doing discharges. That could be, something that I could do. And you just keep looking and adding and saying, okay, overall, I find out that I can do this. Now I say, now I've investigated it. I know there's a return on investment that I want to do. Now I have to basically get that set up. And how do I get it set up? I have to get a vehicle, and the vehicle has to be the right size. Can you put a stretcher in a minivan? Yes, you can. Certain jurisdictions do not allow it. Others have no criteria for it. So you can get a long cut minivan with a rear entry, and besides wheelchair, 2 wheelchairs in there on a long cut, you can put a stretcher in there. A lot of people use a full size van. So when you get that full size van, you use the rear entry and a side lift for that. That's the configuration. But what also has to be done is in there is a lockdown system. There has to be something called antlers in there. And not the Bambi antlers. These are antlers that actually for a stretcher that lock the wheels in, the wheels control system in the front into those wheels. And the other part is the latching mechanism that you lock it over. So those are 2 parts to that. Also, the vehicle has to be long enough to accommodate a stretcher. Most of the full-size vans are. Minivans is a different thing. You have to have a full-size or a long-cut vehicle for that. Once you get all that, then you have to decide. You look at the 2 manufacturers out there. 2 manufacturers, Stryker, yellow stretcher, or Furno, a red stretcher. There are differences between the 2. Seems to be the industry has been the Stryker stretcher. Their cost varies. Some people get them used online in different places. Some people go directly to Stryker to get that done, and that's fine. But you have to make sure, understand what you're getting. So you need some type of professional, consultant, a representative manufacturer of a vehicle, different industry to make sure you can accommodate these stretchers and buying. Keeping in mind that it's a cost that's up there. Then before you take a single passenger, you have to have that training. And you mentioned, what is the better way to do that? Is it better to currently train your own drivers? Absolutely. You try to train your own drivers, but also you want to get somebody in there who knows what they're doing. It's one thing, you don't know what you don't know. And by saying that, you can train a driver, but if he's never done stretcher before, he doesn't know. So it's always better to try to get somebody who's got some experience and maybe make him your head guy for a wheelchair, for stretcher work. But it's important to make sure that individual has some background and understanding of it. That's sort of paramount, because that'll prevent all of those accidents and things like that. Nothing is 100%, but at least you can reduce your possibility of doing it when you properly train and have somebody doing hands-on training, like what we do at NEMTAC.
Okay, Howard, that was the full playbook as you promised. Finding the market demand and doing all the ABC steps to actually do it. Now let's get to the after part. So let's say you do all that. You find that, hey, in my state, I can do stretcher NEMT work. You put all the pieces together. You get your drivers trained. You get the equipment. Now you're doing stretcher work, right? At this point, what are the best operational practices to ensure that, hey, I'm actually profitably making money and doing work that's consistent and having an operation that, you know, has sort of a regular flow of stretcher trips?
The trick to making sure your stretcher work is continuous is always reinvent yourself, continually make sure that you're looking at all of the methods of revenue and you're not turning anything away. So some of those methods are hospital discharges. Where do you look for hospital discharges? There are key people in hospitals and maybe possibly rehab centers that handle that kind of stuff. Discharge nurses, discharge planners, case managers. Those are the three main ones that you can deal with. If you're going to go on a larger scale, potentially you go directly to the administration and potentially get a contract with the facility, the hospital, to handle all of their work. And sometimes you can get that. A lot of them are leading towards service agreements and not contracts. This way they have multiple providers of the hospitals, and the hospitals don't want to put all their eggs in one basket and give one provider all the work. So they'll have multiple. But if you're doing a good job and you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you say and deliver everything you say you're going to do, they're going to like dealing with you, because for one, they clear out the beds in the hospital by doing these discharges, which means they can put somebody back in the bed and continue doing their billing. That's what they do. They need to turn over people. If people are sitting in the hospital beds and you're delayed 3, 4, 5 hours at a time to get somebody picked up, that bed is not being put out for individuals who need it, for one. Second, their revenue source needs to keep turning those beds over. They need to move those individuals out. And that's what non-emergency medical transportation does. And they do it well for the most part across the United States.
You know, Howard, I have a number of customers actually now that focus on doing stretcher work, hospital discharges, and that's actually the bulk of their business, because they find that, hey, you know what, this is the most profitable kind of NEMT to do. They obviously live in states where they're allowed to do that, which is, I don't know, roughly what portion of states would you say?
That is allowed to do that?
Yeah.
It's probably 80%. 80% of the U.S. allows that. There are a lot of jurisdictional areas that don't allow it. Like, again, for Texas is one of those big areas. Even non-emergency ambulance companies who do stretcher. If they're doing a stretcher, they cannot sometimes, if they're non-emergency, they need them. They can't access that guy because he's on a non-emergency call, which means they have one less vehicle in the fleet for a life-saving requirement. So that's why I think it's imperative that non-emergency provides the service. Second, it takes that load off of the ambulance companies.
Yeah, exactly. So this is my big question here. It seems like a win-win-win for everyone. You're saying in 80% of the states, NEMT businesses are allowed to do stretcher work, right? It alleviates the burden from ambulance companies. You know, the hospitals win. The NEMT companies themselves would make more money by doing it. Why aren't way more NEMT businesses doing stretcher work?
I believe for the most part, it's because of there's certain control in place that they don't understand how it works and they're afraid to do it, or somebody says, oh, don't do any stretcher work, it's not worth the time, or the ambulance companies get all the stretcher work, don't bother doing it. Again, do your homework. Find out what you're allowed to do and go forward with it. The biggest problem today is individuals just jump into the business. I want to open up in an area, you know, and they find out they only have 300 people in their town, and, you know, only 15% of them are senior, and those are surprise seniors, so there's no business there. So the idea is make sure you do your homework and understand what is involved with it and the risks that go with it, because there are risks in the wheelchair as well as stretcher industry, but there are also profits in those two as well.
Yeah. And it's like you were saying, you know, there are brokers out there who have to bring in NEMT businesses from long distances away because they can't find companies who are doing stretcher work in their area. So yeah, you have to make sure that there is demand in your area and that it is allowed. But I feel like even in those situations, there's not as many businesses doing stretcher work as there should be. And I think maybe there's a perception that it's maybe too difficult to get into, but I find that, you know, the NEMT businesses, you know, that use Bambi, who do stretcher work, you know, they're smart folks. You know, they went through, you know, finding out what it takes and found that it's more than worth it.
Absolutely. The bottom line with this is you should be doing all the mobilities you can, meaning that you should be doing ambulatory, you should be doing wheelchair, you should be doing stretcher, you should be doing bariatric wheelchair, you should be doing bariatric stretcher work. You possibly should be doing stair chair work, which a lot of people don't do or understand. So all of these things are revenue sources that, you know, you want to make sure you do, and don't leave money on the table. Make sure you offer everything. It's like opening up a store, and in the store you say, well, I'm only going to carry this type of product or that type of product. And the idea is you have a store, carry all the products that you can carry, and, you know, just make sure there's a demand for it to do all of those products. And there is a demand out there, and it's a growing demand. And in a lot of areas, specifically stretcher is in high demand. And a lot of guys have marketed that niche, and that's all they do. They don't want to do anything else. They are known as the stretcher company. In my consulting company and my 30 plus years of experience, I've always found that individuals will gravitate to what they do best. And by educating them, making them understand it, they'll grow their company. As a consultant, I help them understand that and see what market niches they need to fill, what's not being filled in the area, and how to position themselves, price themselves, and basically offer their services to the healthcare industry. And it does well.
Well, folks, you heard it from the man himself. Howard, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. I will be putting Howard's contact info in the description of this video. Howard, any final thoughts you want to share?
No, it's, again, just making sure when you're doing specifically stretcher work. I travel quite a few places and been training quite a few people. Especially the last couple of weeks, there's been a very heavy demand because of a number of the transportation brokers are requiring it out there. Make sure you train your people, make sure you understand how to do it, and make sure everything works properly. Doing pre-trip inspections should include all of the wheelchair and stretcher securement items in there, the lifts, the ramps, all of that stuff needs to be included in that. And that's it.
You are a treasure trove of knowledge. Thanks again, Howard. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And run, Bambi, run.
Run, Bambi, run.